Thank you very much, Leah. So first of all, my Bob Weinberg connection is I applied to his lab and he rejected me. So thanks, Bob. Years ago, I was at a cocktail party and a man came up to me and he said, "Your wife just told me that you're the smartest man she has ever met." And I said, "That's very nice, but now let's do an experiment." So I walked him over to my wife, Carolyn, and I said, "Care, who is the dumbest man you've ever met?" She said, "Oh, that's easy. You are." Now, if you think I'm being immodest, when I was here in 2024 for the Hope Funds Gala, I got here and I realized, oh my God, I forgot my vest. I'm here without my vest. I'm never going to do that again. During the cocktails, I realized I forgot my cummerbund. So now I'm going to have a year of nightmares of what I'm going to forget to wear for future Hope Funds events. So it's very meaningful for me to be in this building, in this home of Doris Duke. You heard a little bit about Doris Duke. So my paternal grandfather was a poor laborer. My father was first generation college. He realized his family would never be able to afford an established elite school such as an Ivy League school. So he went to the public library and tried to find a relatively young university that might be up and coming and might still be affordable. And he found a school that was founded in 1924, the year that Doris Duke inherited this home, as Duke University. So he attended Duke University. He got a scholarship to go to Duke Law School. He could then afford to send me to Duke and to go to Duke Medical School and to have then later my scientific career. So a lot of Duke connections. As you heard, the Doris Duke Foundation supported me when I was a junior faculty member, and I can tell you how important that validation and funding is to a young scientist. So thank you, thank you, thank you for the work that you're doing. It's simply so important. As you also heard, Hope Funds has funded Nithin Shiroli in my laboratory. So we live in a time where I think we all need some good news, and there are only so many Ted Lasso reruns you can watch. So I just want to leave you with a couple pieces of good news. So if you talk to any cancer biologist, any medical oncologist, they would probably tell you that pancreatic cancer and glioblastoma are amongst the worst cancers, the most difficult to treat, the most intractable. And there's been some good news on both fronts. Jordan alluded to this a moment ago in pancreatic cancer. So it turns out that 20% of all cancers have a mutation in a gene that cancer biologists call RAS. And it results in the RAS being overactive and it drives cellular proliferation. 90% of pancreatic cancers have an overactive RAS, have one of those RAS mutations. One of our previous awardees, Kaelin Shokat, who was here in 2024, developed what I'll call first generation RAS inhibitors. Pretty good proof of concept, but not quite good enough. Now we have second generation RAS inhibitors, and the results were made public just a few months ago at the largest medical oncology meeting for pancreatic cancer and a few other cancers. And with these second generation RAS inhibitors, they doubled the time to progression, they doubled the response rate. It got a standing ovation with 30,000 oncologists in the audience because no one ever thought they would see this in pancreatic cancer. So that was fantastic. Obviously one of the major events in all of medical oncology in recent memory. But the bad news is most of the patients still progressed over a matter of months. So again, very frustrating when you see a response, but it doesn't last as long as you want. But we've known for years that the way to really beat cancer is to combine two or more drugs that have very different mechanisms of action, so the cancer can't figure out an easy workaround. And it turns out that about 40% of pancreatic cancers are missing a gene that scientists call MTAP, MTAP, and they become very sensitive to drugs that inhibit another protein called PRMT5. I'm sorry for the acronyms and the jargon. All this is to say that for those patients, there are actually two drugs you can combine that can kill the pancreatic cancer cells. Now the response rate, which was just reported a week or two ago, was 92% had tumor shrinkage, 100% had control of the tumors, and it looks like these responses may well last years and not months. So I'm getting chills even telling you this because I didn't know that I would live to see this. A lot of oncologists have just tossed up their hands in the air and said we'll never get there. So that's pancreatic cancer. I think we're finally getting there. Glioblastoma, another terrible disease. Now, two of our other Hope Funds awardees were Carl June and Michelle Sutherland for developing what are known as CAR T cells. These are examples where you can take a patient's own immune cells, specifically their T cells, re-engineer them in the laboratory so they'll be better cancer fighters, give them back to the patient and hope they do their job. The original CAR T cells were aimed at cancers of the so-called B cells, lymphomas. and leukemias. So there have been several advances here. So one is it was a little bit clunky to have to take the patient's T cells, go to the laboratory, engineer them, give them back. Now scientists have figured out a way where you can just give the genetic material IV to the patient, and the patient will make their own CAR T cells. So that's number one. Number two, following that playbook, we now have evidence that you can engineer CAR T cells to fight glioblastomas. Now, I would say it's a glimmer of hope. We've had a few patients respond. Many of the responses have been short-lived. But again, given where we've been with glioblastoma, I think our foot's in the door now to make smarter and smarter and smarter CAR T cells to kill glioblastomas, to let the immune system do the work. Now, another truism in science is if you invest in creating new knowledge, sometimes it pays dividends that you couldn't have anticipated. So the early generations of CAR T cells, as a feature, killed malignant B cells. B cells are the immune cells that make antibodies. A clink in their design, however, was they also killed normal B cells. But it turns out a lot of terrible, terrible autoimmune diseases like lupus, like rheumatoid arthritis, are driven by B cells. And within the past year or two, we've learned that CAR T cells aimed at B cells, I'm sorry, that's a mouthful, in some patients looks like it may be curing lupus and other autoimmune diseases. So here's knowledge from cancer now being applied to really horrible autoimmune diseases. And so that's, again, the beauty of science. I realize it's sometimes frustrating that it's unpredictable, but to me that's the most exciting thing about it. So I mentioned glioblastoma. Now, my wife would have loved to have been here because she was a physician scientist. She was a breast cancer surgeon. She had an MPH. She studied survivorship. But glioblastoma is unfortunately the disease that took her life in 2015. And again, she would be applauding what we're doing here and saying, a little bit late, don't you think? We should have done this a little earlier, but okay, better late than never. But she would certainly be applauding this. But I can tell you, as a doctor and a scientist and a husband, the worst day of my life was when I realized we were out of bullets. We simply were out of bullets. And I know if Kaelin was here, she'd say, do not let this happen to our children or our grandchildren. Keep doing the work, keep moving the field forward so that one day we can say, cancer, that was a scary thing one day, but now we don't have to think about it. And finally, I know this is an election year. I'm not going to be political, but let's just all agree. There are a lot of things we can disagree about, but let's just agree science should not be political. I can tell you, cancer's not caring, as far as I can tell, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, so we better unify and fight as one. Thank you very much.